I lost the biggest fish of my life because of a poorly tied knot. It was a huge triera, a type of fish, at least 4 kilos, maybe more. It pulled the line with all its might. I felt the jolt, lifted the rod, and in 2 seconds, the line came loose. It wasn't the hook that opened. It wasn't the line that broke. It was the knot. A knot I learned in 3 minutes from a quick tutorial and thought I was ready to use. That stayed on my mind for weeks. That same day I went to talk to my grandfather. He fished for over 50 years in the Paraná River, supporting his family with fish caught from the water. And I never, in any of the stories he told me, heard him say that he lost a fish because of a knot. Never. I asked him what he used. He looked at me with that face of someone about to state the obvious and said, "Boy, you don't know how to tie a fishing line." And he taught me. What you're going to see here is exactly that knot. A knot that I spent years using incorrectly, that almost disappeared when my grandfather passed away, and that I now use on every fishing trip, without exception. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Every week there's this kind of content coming. The kind of thing that no fishing store will teach you. My grandfather's name was Seu Geraldo. He was born in 1938 in a city on the banks of the Paraná River, and from the age of 8 he had already accompanied his father on early morning fishing trips. He didn't have sophisticated equipment. No state-of-the-art monofilament, no carbon rod, no imported reel. He had thick nylon line, tempered steel hooks, and an enormous accumulation of knowledge passed down from generation to generation. The kind of knowledge that didn't come from a manual, but from observation and costly mistakes. He fished for dorado, pintado catfish, pacu, and carp, the big fish of the river. And to catch big fish, you need a system that doesn't fail at the most critical moment. That second when the fish feels the hook and decides to give everything it has to escape. In that second, every weak point in your equipment becomes apparent, and the knot is almost always the weakest point. When I was a child and I would sit by the river with him, I would watch my grandfather tying the fishing hook, and I found it boring. It seemed too simple, too slow. He made methodical movements, carefully passing the line through specific points, wetting it before tightening, pulling slowly, testing the knot by pulling from different angles. It took longer than I thought necessary. I just wanted to throw the line into the water. I only understood the reason for each step when I was already in my 20s and had a good collection of fish lost in my memory. The knot my grandfather used doesn't have a famous name in the manuals. It's not the Palomar. It's not the improved clinch. It's not the uni knot. It's a variation of an old knot used by riverside fishermen in Paraná, and I've never found it described in any fishing book. I tested it against the most well-known knots for years, and the results I found justify this entire video. The origin of this knot likely stems from a mixture of techniques. European immigrants who arrived in southern Brazil in the late 19th century brought fishing methods from European rivers. These methods were adapted to the conditions of Brazilian rivers. More aggressive fish, more turbid water, different hook designs. What remained after decades of adaptation was a knot that worked specifically for the type of run that fish in the Paraná and São Francisco rivers make. Short, violent, and unpredictable. This knowledge spread from fisherman to fisherman along the riverbanks. There were no patents, no courses, no videos. It was oral. My grandfather learned from his father learned from his grandfather, and so on. As the fishing industry grew in Brazil starting in the 1980s, this type of knowledge gradually lost ground. Stores began selling ready-made systems, swivels, pressure clips, quick connectors, all designed so that the fisherman wouldn't need to learn how to tie properly. It's easier to sell an accessory than to teach a technique. more profitable too. And so the traditional knots faded from collective memory. My grandfather passed away in 2019. 2 years before that, I had the presence of mind to sit with him, turn on my cell phone camera, and record. I filmed his hands, every detail, every step. I wrote everything down as he explained. Today, that video is saved in 3 different places because I never want to lose that file. And this knot won't die with him. It will continue to be passed on. That's why I'm making this video. Before we continue, let me tell you something quick. If you want to go beyond the knots and understand fishing completely, how to read the water, how to identify where the fish are before even casting your line, how to use currents and tides to your advantage, how to make quick decisions when you're in the boat, I've compiled all of this into a resource called High-Level Fishing, the water game. It's the stuff experienced anglers have learned over decades on the water, and it's rarely found anywhere in an organized way. The link is in the description. Go check it out after you finish the video. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter. What makes a knot fail? The answer is simple, but most fishermen have never stopped to think about it. Fishing line has a nominal strength, the number written on the packaging. For example, 0.35 millimeter line has a 15-kilo resistance rating. However, no knot uses 100% of that resistance. When you tie a knot, you create bends in the line. Each bend is a point of concentrated tension. When the fish pulls, the force isn't distributed along the entire line. It's concentrated at these bend points, and the line gives way there, with only a fraction of the force it should withstand. This is what engineers call stress concentration. And that's why 15 kilobar lines break with 7 kilon or 8 kilo of force when the knot is bad. A simple clinch knot, poorly executed, has an efficiency of 50% to 60%. You're throwing away half the line's strength. A well-made Palomar knot reaches 90%, 95%. These are good numbers, but there's a detail that the numbers don't show. Consistency. A Palomar knot tied in a hurry, with cold thread, and a tired hand at 5 in the morning on the boat, drops to 70%. I've tested this, and it's precisely at 5 in the morning with a cold hand that you most need the knot to work. The knot my grandfather used has a different consistency. Its design has a characteristic that few knots have. It's self-compensating. If you make a small mistake in tying it, one less turn, a slightly irregular loop, the final locking mechanism corrects it. The knot closes uniformly regardless of small variations in execution. When I tested it with a dynamometer, under different conditions, this knot showed efficiency between 92% and 98% in monofilament, and between 88% and 95% in fluorocarbon. But more important than the average number was the low amplitude. It doesn't vary much. On a bad day, with cold hands and in a hurry, it still stays at 88%. That matters more than having 98% in an ideal situation. The other characteristic that makes it special is its response to sudden loads. Most knots have been tested and optimized for gradual loads, increasing and constant pressure. But in reel fishing, especially with predatory fish, the load is sudden. The fish gives a violent jerk in milliseconds. In this situation, the knot's inertia matters, how it behaves in the first instant of the load. Knots with many crossed bends have high inertia. They take a moment to settle, and that moment can be enough for the line to give way. My grandfather's knot has a geometry that distributes the load immediately, without a transition moment. My grandfather didn't know any of this in technical terms, but he knew, empirically, that the knot worked for Traira, a type of freshwater fish, and Dorado, another type of freshwater fish. And Traira gives exactly that kind of jerk. Short, brutal, in the direction you least expect. 50 years of fishing for this fish shaped a specific knot for that specific force. Now, the step-by-step instructions. Read carefully, because some details may seem small, but they make a real difference in the final result. You will need fishing line and a hook. Nothing else. No tools. No accessories. The knot works with monofilament, fluorocarbon, and multifilament. The basic instructions are the same for all, with minor variations that I'll show you later. Step 1. Pass the line through the eye of the hook from bottom to top. Leave exactly 20 centimeters of excess. This measurement matters. Less than that, and you won't have enough material for the rigging. More than that is wasted line with no gain. 20 centimeters. Memorize this number. Step 2. With the remaining material, form a loop parallel to the hook, to the side, not through the eye. The loop should be about 8 centimeters in diameter. Hold this loop firmly between the thumb and forefinger of your left hand. Do not let it rotate while working through the following steps. This is the first mistake most people make, dropping the loop mid-process. Step 3. With the free end of the excess yarn, make 5 loops around the main yarn and the loop together. 5 loops, not 4, not 6, 5. Each loop should be parallel to the previous one without crossing. Parallel. If the loops cross, you have created exactly the type of stress concentration point we want to eliminate. If this happens, don't try to correct it. Undo it and start over from scratch. Here's the detail my grandfather emphasized most strongly. The detail I barely noticed the first time he taught me. The loops must move towards the hook with each pass. Not parallel horizontally, in a descending spiral, getting closer to the hook with each turn. Think of a spring being compressed. This movement creates a compression geometry that is the origin of resistance to sudden loads. Step 4. After the 5 turns, hold them with your index finger so they don't unravel. With the free end, pass the yarn through the loop you formed in Step 2. The direction is important. From the inside out. Pass from inside the loop towards the main yarn, exiting on the outside. Hold this end. Don't let go. Step 5. Wet the knot. This step is not optional and is not superstition. Water reduces friction while you tighten. Without water, the heat generated by friction during tightening weakens the nylon and fluorocarbon into invisible microcracks that only appear when the fish pulls. Saliva works perfectly. My grandfather always used saliva. He called it respecting the line. Step 6. Now tighten slowly. Hold the main line with one hand, the hook with the other, and pull with increasing slow pressure. Watch the knot forming. You will see the loops arranging themselves in a spiral near the hook. When you feel the knot settling, you will feel a slight, different resistance. Then increase the pressure until it locks completely. Don't rush this moment. A knot tightened too quickly loses the geometry of the loops. Step 7. The 3-angle test. Pull the hook straight up to the line. Then sideways, 90 degrees. Then 45 degrees. Each angle simulates a direction the fish might strike. If the knot held all 3 angles without slipping, it's ready. If it slipped at any angle, start again. Fishing line is cheap. A 4-kilogram fish doesn't show up every week. Trim the excess fabric, leaving 2 millimeters beyond the knot. Do not cut it flush. 2 millimeters protects the knot from unraveling with continuous use. The first time you do it, it will take about 3 minutes. With practice, it'll be done in 40 seconds. My grandfather used to do it in 20, in the dark, purely by touch. Now for the variations. The basic node is the same, but small adjustments make it work better in specific situations. For very thin line, below 0.25 millimeters, reduced to 4 turns in step 3. Thin line with 5 turns creates a proportionally large knot that interferes with the lure's natural movement. 4 turns maintain resistance with a smaller profile and cleaner movement. For multifilament, high-strength braided lines increase to 6 or 7 turns. Multifilament is inherently slippery. The smooth surface of the braided fibers doesn't create natural friction like monofilament. Extra turns compensate for this. Another adaptation for multifilament: wet it twice. Once before you start tightening, and again halfway through the process when the turns are already forming. For hooks with very small eyes, such as the thin Japanese hooks used for small fish and tilapia, make the initial loop smaller, about 5 centimeters instead of 8. The principle is identical. The scale is reduced. For bottom fishing with heavy weights, where the line is under constant tension for long periods without movement. After cutting off the excess, briefly pass a lighter over the cut end to slightly melt the nylon. This creates a microscopic head that prevents any gradual fraying. Caution: do not do this with fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon reacts poorly to direct heat and weakens at the point of contact. There's a specific situation where this knot outperforms any other I've ever tested. Fish that make short, violent runs in the first second after feeling the hook. Traira, wolf fish, tucunare, peacock bass, snook in salt water, large piranha. These fish don't test the line slowly. They give a brutal jerk immediately. It's precisely at this moment that most knots give way, because the initial load is the most critical point. The spiral geometry of my grandfather's knot was essentially shaped by this type of fish. It wasn't designed in a laboratory. It was refined over decades of real fishing with fish that punish any weak point immediately. Regarding when and where to use this knot, it's specifically for connecting a hook or lure with an eyelet to the main line or leader. It's not the best knot for connecting 2 pieces of line. For that, the double uni knot is superior. It's not ideal for connecting line to the reel. The arbor knot works better there. Each connection point has its correct knot, and this one was developed specifically for connecting to the hook. The best time to practice for the first time, at home, without a fish to think about, without rushing, without cold hands. Practice 10 times in a row, then 20, until your fingers know the way without your brain needing to think. Because when a big fish appears, the last thing you want is to be paying attention to the knot. You want the knot tied and all your attention on the fish. I learned that the hard way. One afternoon in October, years ago, I was fishing for carp at a lake in Minas Gerais. I saw a school of large carp breaking the surface about 20 meters away. I changed hooks in a hurry, tied them quickly, and cast the bait in the right spot. The carp took the bait. I felt that immense weight on the first tug. I lifted the rod with all my might, and the line broke. The knot gave way. The carp was gone. I stood there looking at the water for about 5 minutes. It wasn't the fish that frustrated me. It was the certainty that it had happened because of my carelessness. The equipment failed because I didn't prepare it properly. My grandfather was right. A fisherman who doesn't prepare his equipment beforehand is asking to lose. He used to say that regularly, and I thought it was an exaggeration. It wasn't an exaggeration. He wasn't talking about expensive rods or imported reels. He was talking about attention, about doing everything right, even when it seems unnecessary, especially when it seems unnecessary. This respect for the process is what separates those who fish well from those who fish by luck. Luck sometimes comes along. The process always works. If you've made it this far, you already know the knot. But knowing how to tie it is only part of the game. The other part, knowing where the fish are, how to read the water before casting the line, how the current is directing the schools of fish, how the fish's behavior changes with temperature and time of day, is what consistently puts fish on the hook. I've brought all of this together in high-level fishing, the water game. Reading freshwater and saltwater, how to identify structures where the fish actually are instead of just trying to catch them in dead spots, how to use currents and tides to your advantage, fish behavior patterns that allow you to predict where they will be. These are things that experienced anglers carry in their memory and that rarely appear together in one place. The link is in the description and in the first pinned comment. Go there after you close this video. Imagine how your next fishing trip will be when you combine a knot that won't break with the ability to read where the fish are. You stop relying on trial and error. You stop spending hours in one spot without results. You go into the water with a plan and equipment that won't let you down at the most important moment. That's the difference between fishing strategically and waiting for luck to strike. Now I need you to tell me something. What was the biggest fish you ever lost because of a knot? Comment below. I read all the comments, and I'm sure whoever is watching this video has a good story to tell. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week there's a video like this, practical fishing knowledge that comes from someone who's spent years on the water, not from someone who's read about fishing. Next week there will be a video about how to read the current to identify where the fish are still. It's one of the things that makes the biggest difference on a day when there aren't many bites. Don't miss it. Until then, happy fishing.